everybody. My name's Lydia Woodyatt and I am speaking to you from Flinders University. So hello from South Australia. And I'd just like to start by acknowledging that I'm particularly standing on Kaurna country, and it's our privilege to be celebrating our 1 year anniversary of our reconciliation plan, but also of course NIDOC week this week. And we pay respect to Indigenous elders past, present and emerging, and we remember that this land was never ceded. This morning we're going to be talking about supporting wellbeing of staff in higher education, and I really probably should say wellbeing of ourselves in higher education, because it's probably perfectly obvious to you that this has been a difficult 18 months. The work's been difficult, the work's been hard. We've had increasingly higher and higher pressures put on us, but with reduced resources. So across the sector, we're experiencing all sorts of difficulties. And so on one hand, we can kind of throw our hands up in the air and say, well, it's all too difficult, there's just increasing pressure and it's all systemic, and how can we fix it? Or we can look at strategies that actually can be applied to ourselves and to our own institutions to try and address some of those issues. And I guess that kind of comes to me from being convinced of a couple of things. First, I come out of a student wellbeing background. So I'm absolutely convinced from focus groups I've run with our own students, from reading the research, from looking at the experience of students across the sector, that student experience of wellbeing is dramatically impacted by the wellbeing and the mental health awareness of their staff. And this, of course, has been put into a nice framework within the university mental health framework, which gives staff a place as an important part of being the vehicle of support for students. The second issue that I think is really important is that staff retention, absenteeism and presenteeism, these are major costs for any organisation, not just for universities, but for any organisation, these are huge costs. And often these things are invisible in academic workforce. So part of what's happened in COVID is some of these things are being called out, and we're seeing an increase in things like absenteeism across all sorts of industries. But we need to be looking at those real costs that our institutions are carrying, because if we're really trying to maximise the resources we have, then we really need to pay attention to where the costs are leaking out. The third thing is that there's this ethicality, I think, around wellbeing. So when we get a staff member, especially an academic staff member or a professional staff member, these are people who are highly specialised, have long histories of knowledge and resources and skills that have been developed and invested in financially by the Australian people, really, over a long period of time, through their training, through their work. And when we aren't able to maintain an environment that is mentally healthy for those staff to maintain their own well-being, then we are actually in a situation where we are sinking not just that person, but all the resource that's been invested in them over time. So as employers, we actually have an ethical responsibility to be good stewards of the people that are given to us and the resources that those people represent. And I think about it in the same way for myself as a staff member. I've had a lot of resource invested into me through my training, through my time working in the university sector. I've received a huge amount of public money. And so part of me being a good steward of that resource is actually looking after my own well-being. And I think this is really important to keep this front of mind, especially if we're working in areas like student support or if we're equity practitioners, because we're often in an environment where the need is always excessively high. And so we constantly feel that need to give and give and give more. But if we don't remember that actually we're also ethically obligated to maintain our own well-being so that we're able to ongoingly invest in those situations rather than burning ourselves out, I think that can help us keep some of the other pressures to kind of work more and do more in a little bit of balance. And the final thing I guess that I've been convinced of is that universities and work actually has lots of benefits. So there's lots of good things that we get in terms of well-being, especially working in universities. I mean, we're highly connected to a sense of purpose. We often are part of communities that have a strong sense of belonging and identity. We're part of often important social justice missions in the world. We have a large degree of autonomy relative to other jobs. I often say, if you can't find something that's interesting to you in universities, then you're not looking hard enough, because there are so many interesting problems to which we can apply ourselves in our work. And so I guess I wanted to just say, to me, there's a hopeful note there that actually if we work as institutions together, there is potential to increase the wellbeing of our staff. We don't have to kind of, like I said, throw our hands up in the air and say, all the institutional pressures, all the endemic problems with higher education, what are we going to do about it? The answer is actually we're probably one of the best placed industries to do something about the wellbeing of our staff. And if this is something that we take seriously. So that's kind of talking big picture stuff, I guess, in terms of the why we should care about wellbeing, both as individuals and as institutions. But then I wanted to move in and just talk about, what are some strategies we can apply? There's a couple of things that COVID has reminded us of that I think, especially as equity practitioners, you already know. The first is wellbeing is holistic and intersectional. COVID has reminded us again that actually wellbeing, stress, experiences of psychological distress, people going downhill in terms of their mental health, that's not disconnected from physical health, from financial status, from academic backgrounds, from issues around accessibility. All of those issues can multiply disadvantage, and all of those issues can impact on wellbeing. And so in the same way, if we want to address wellbeing, we need to recognise that wellbeing is holistic and it is intersectional. So when we're developing, whether it's a wellbeing plan for ourselves, for our local group of staff that we work with, or for a wider part of the university, how is it that we're going to address the holistic and intersectional needs, particularly issues around finance, issues around stability of work, issues around having access to community. All of these issues need to be addressed. And I guess connected to this is also the need to remember that life is actually also more than work. So sometimes our focus on wellbeing can become so much about work. And I think through COVID, we kind of felt like work became the whole story. I don't know about you, but especially during that first 6 months, as we kind of adapted to online and we were changing messaging all the time and working out what this meant for our students and assessment and finances and international. And as we're dealing with all of that, the danger is that the work starts to take up more and more of our life and how we understand ourselves and what we find meaningful. And I think because COVID also took away some things depending on where you lived, that we also lost other areas where our psychological needs were being met. So COVID really across the workforces has showed us that that's not so healthy. We can't have work be the only thing in our life. It can't be, the case that all of our psychological eggs are in that one basket. And so it's always a good reminder to think about our psychological needs. And we talk about our needs for belonging, our needs for purpose and meaning, our need for agency or autonomy, and our need for growth and mastery. And all of these needs, yes, it's good if all of them can be met at work, and certainly if we're developing a holistic plan, these are some of the issues we might want to think about. However, they also shouldn't all be met at work. They should be met in other areas. So diversifying your social life, your social groups, experimenting with new hobbies or new things that might interest you is really important. So building more into your life than just work. And again, this is a real challenge of, I think, caregivers, because caregivers, whether they work in, in the healthcare setting or in welfare settings or not-for-profit settings, the mission and the purpose is so important that our tendency is, again, to give and give and give and give. And the purpose, the sense of purpose, overrides actually looking after ourselves in the broader broader sense, and remembering that we are actually holistic beings, and we do need to remember that we also need to be eating right and exercising and sleeping and having time with friends or connections, having the goals that we're setting and moving towards. These are all important parts of our well-being. So just like we wouldn't flourish physically if we weren't taking care of some of those basic nutritional needs, paying attention to our own psychological needs and looking for diverse places where those can be met, both at work but also outside of work, is really important for our well-being. The third thing that COVID's reminded us of is that we actually have to make time and give our energy to things that bring us joy. I don't know about you, but during COVID, I really felt like work became a bit of a grind. And I love my work normally, but I felt like because it was the main thing that we were doing for a while there, other things got kind of cut out of your life. And then you kind of get in the situation, you're like, where am I experiencing joy? Where is the fun? And I guess there needs to be fun at work. We definitely need to make things help. I think of it as meaningful fun. So actually finding the work that is fun. What is the work that's inspiring or creative or interesting that we can involve our staff in? So that it's not just the everyday routine grind. But also for ourselves outside of work, where are we making time for and giving our energy to things that bring us joy. One of the things we've done this year at Flinders is we ran the Good Vibes experiment, which was actually a co-designed project between staff and students, where we identified evidence-based strategies that improve mental health, and we had a series of resources to encourage students and staff and in the Flinders community to participate in the Good Vibes experiment. And you're welcome to check out those resources if you'd like to. But one of the things I like about that approach is that it's not this one size fits all, okay? The same thing that gives me joy may not give you joy, but experimenting is the way to find those things. So allowing ourselves to experiment, to find things that give us a sense of awe or gratitude or satisfaction, help us to be reflective, to experience all those different aspects of life that help to make life meaningful. The other thing we learnt through COVID, or we were reminded through COVID, is that burnout is real. It's a psychological consequence of our system being exhausted. I think of it as, if you imagine your brain is a tank filled with neurochemicals, it's your tank getting drained and then you insisting that your tank still keeps pouring out stuff, but it's actually empty. Exhaustion is real, and when we hit that point, it's very hard for our system to bounce back. So I guess one thing to remember is that we need to actually monitor how we're doing, and I'll talk about that in a second, in order to not get to that stage ideally. I recently went through a process of renovating and selling a house. And of course, if you've been through it, it's very frustrating when you renovate a house and do all the things that you've been planning to do for like 10 years only to give it to someone else. And I think this is kind of the case with wellbeing. Sometimes we wait until the very end and then we have to do all the hard work. Whereas if we just did the little bits of work along the way, then we'd actually get the benefit of living in our own lives rather than waiting until things are so bad we have to totally gut the system and start again. So burnout is real. It's the consequence of exhaustion. But I think it's especially an important issue for equity practitioners. So we need to remember that on one hand, I think some of the things that protect us from burnout is connecting to others who care about the same things that we do, that remind us that what we're doing is important, make us feel valued in our work and like we're doing a good job, that reinforce that actually, yes, we are good group members and relationship partners by caring about this stuff and by working on this stuff, and we're part of a community that cares about it. So things like this event, I don't know, some of you might be at STARS conference this week, but other higher ed conferences, places where you connect with like-minded people are really important. On the flip side though, you also need to take time off. You need to be able to compartmentalise out that caring and that intensity of that push for change, push for helping, and you actually need to rest. Learning to compartmentalise is a key part of professional life if you are in any kind of helping industry. That ability to switch off and to do something else with your mind, with your heart, and so important for people who especially are engaged in social justice missions, because the challenge of that is chronic. It's there all the time. It never goes away. Those issues are always present, but our body can't constantly engage a problem. It has to take seasons of rest. Then part of that, I guess, is I think the importance of self-assessing, reflecting on how we're going, reflecting on what we need to do to build skills that are going to actually help us to face difficulties, to adapt to change, because in reality, change is not going to go away. I think, COVID is just going to keep the sector changing as we move forward. Higher education is not going to be the same. No one thinks that's the case. So we need to be able to adapt to change. If we're the kind of people that really struggle with change and uncertainty, there are skills we can learn, like physical training. There's training we can do to improve our cognitive capacity to cope. Again, I have some research that has led to a program here at Flinders that we've developed in partnership with SAMRI called the Be Well Co. And I've put the links in the resources, but it's basically a 5-week, firstly, there's a self-assessment you can do for free, and there's online resources there that you're welcome to look through. But it actually feeds into a program that you can sign up for that's 5 weeks long, not 5 full weeks, but 5 weekly sessions. And it really works to build a range of skills into you so that you then are aware of those skills and you can use them when those challenges come. What we know from the research is, firstly, you've got to differentiate based on your need. So that program actually allows you to choose things that suit you, and based on the evidence, strategies that apply to those needs. The second thing we know is actually just attending sessions like this doesn't improve your wellbeing. Sorry, I wish it did, but just listening to information doesn't necessarily improve your wellbeing. We have to actually work at these things. Like physical health, we have to work and we have to put the things in place to see change. And the 5-week program, because it enables you to be doing that over time on a targeted issue, can actually help to create change. And we're seeing good outcomes in that in our students, seeing good effect sizes of change in wellbeing. And finally, my final point is that we can work together to promote institutional change. So actually, all of this stuff is good, but whether you're engaging at a grassroots level, at a system-wide level, the more that we can align, that we can work together, that we can create awareness of mental health issues, not just mental illness, but also wellbeing supporting behaviours, the more that we cooperate, the more we can achieve. And I think in the past, often different pockets of people kind of wanted to own mental health. Psychology wanted to own mental health. I'm a psychologist. Psychiatry wanted to own mental health. Health wanted to own mental health. But now we're beyond that. We recognise, much like COVID, that you don't solve things if you don't work together. And so this is really a time, mental health is on everyone's agenda. It's on young people's agenda. It's on employees and employers' agendas. So now is the time to work together to promote institutional change and to start institutional conversations. Now, sometimes we have to do the work to foster those institutional conversations. Focus groups, getting people together, costing things, working out what actually is the economic impact of some of these types of issues. So it's not easy work to do, but it is possible. And I think that's something that sometimes it feels like it's not, because we are in this system that has so many pressures on it that we feel like these things are costly for wellbeing. But on the flip side, we also have relative control of our organisations. We have leaders that are capable of thinking about big picture and big issues. And there's actual solutions that are available and out there in the research that we can start to apply. So this is not actually a problem that is not fixable if we work together. All right, nice to be with you all, and I hope you have a wonderful session, and there's some additional resources and I'll make sure my slides are available to share. Thanks.